afternoon, Ms. Nases. No? This will be my video lecture in legal aspects in the tourism and hospitality industry. Today is November 24. It's a Thursday afternoon, which is our usual time. And as is customary, I have a reminder to you. Tomorrow will be the big day for the Pangasinan Singing Idol. It will be the elimination and semi-final round. I'd like you to be around by then. No? The program starts at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'd like you also to watch the elimination and semi-final round. And you have to make a reaction paper to that one. And that will be your assignment. No? So I repeat, your assignment, which is assignment number 10, I guess. Assignment number 10 will be to make a reaction paper to the elimination and semi-final round of the Pangasinan Singing Idol, which will be held tomorrow, no? November 25, 2022 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. No? So today, we continue with the discussion on employment law. No, employment law, or otherwise known as labor law. No? So when we speak of employment law, we are also referring to what we call the labor law in the Philippines. No? And of course, as I have discussed before, labor law, the prevailing law for labor law is PD, Presidential Decree number 442, which was promulgated by President Marcos on May 1, 1974. But this law speaks of its effectivity 6 months after its promulgation. So the effectivity date of our labor law was on November 1, 1974. So last time, we talked about the types of employment. So you already know what a regular or permanent employee is, what a casual employee is, what a fixed or term employee is, what a seasonal employee is, and all others. No, project employee is. Today, we will be discussing the rights of workers, what we call the workers' rights. So we are still in PD 442. No, PD 442 is the labor code of the Philippines. No? Labor code of the Philippines. Now, this law is the prevailing law. No? This is the law that is followed in our jurisdiction, in our country. And this one applies to employees in the private sector. No? Employees in the private sector. Remember this. The labor law applies only to employees in the private sector. Because if you are employed in the government, of course, you will not be using, or you will not be bound by the labor code of the Philippines. They have a different law which is governed by the civil service law. No? So remember that when we talk of the labor code, it only applies to employees in the private sector, not in the government. Now, of course, for today, if you will notice in the Constitution, there are rights of workers, and we call them the workers' rights. No? The workers' rights. No? Meaning, employees' rights. No? Workers' rights. Okay? Let us mention them one by one. No? So the first right of the worker is the right to self-organization. Right to self-organization. Now, when we talk of the right to self-organization, every employee or worker in the private sector has the right to form, to join, to assist what? A labor union, a labor organization, or a labor union. No? Clear? This is a basic right which is guaranteed by the Constitution. It is a right of or bestowed to workers, no, workers or employees. No? You cannot deny this right because of the fact that uh, it is intended for negotiation. No? Negotiation with whom? Negotiation with the employer. No? And the purpose of this is, of course, purpose is to negotiate for what? Better terms and conditions of employment. So we proceed with number 2 rights of workers would be, okay, the second right of a worker is the right to collective bargaining. No? Right to collective bargaining. And how do they do this? No? Collective bargaining. You remember collective bargaining. How do they collectively bargain? Well, through the union. No? The union acts in representation of the employees. No? The union acts as a representative of the employees, or we call this the LO, labor organization. No? So here, when we talk of collective bargaining, we are talking of the right of employees, no, to bargain or to negotiate. Collective bargaining would involve negotiation, no? Negotiation. No? So here, when we talk of the right of the workers to collective bargaining, we are talking of the right to negotiate with the employer. And they can do that through the union, or what we call labor organization. What are they going to negotiate? SNASES, what are they going to negotiate? As workers or employees, what will they negotiate? Well, they can negotiate for what? Better terms and conditions of employment. No? Better terms and conditions of employment. What are these better terms and conditions of employment? Well, of course, it may be this one, better terms. Of course, it has something to do with the pay, with the privileges, with the benefits, no? Conditions of work, no? Everything, anything under the sun that will affect the employee. They have the right to negotiate, and the negotiation happens or is done by the union. No, that's why you cannot deny the right of the workers to form, to assist, and to join labor unions or labor organizations. Okay, clear? We proceed with the third right of workers. No, and the third right of workers is also guaranteed by the Constitution. And what right is this? No, we call this right the right to security of tenure. Right to security. I'd like you to memorize this workers' rights. This nonsense. No? Right to security of tenure. Because someday, somehow, you might become also an employee or a worker. What do we understand by the principle of security of tenure? It means that you cannot just be removed from your job without just or authorized causes. No? So in short, once you become a regular employee or a permanent employee, or a permanent employee, you cannot be removed from your office without just or authorized causes. This was your assignment last time, no? The just or authorized causes. So you have to remember also what are just causes, what are authorized causes. Now, once you become a regular employee, how do you become a regular or permanent employee? Well, after serving continuously for 6 months, no, you become regularized, no, 6 months. So once you become a regular employee, a permanent employee, you now have a security of tenure to your job, no, meaning you become permanent to your job, and being so, you cannot just be removed unless for a just or authorized cause. No, this was your assignment. So I do not want to belabor my discussion for today about these causes, but some other time, no? Because we are still in the workers' rights. So what is the fourth right of employees or workers, no? We have the right to just and humane conditions of work. Right to just and humane, no? Humane, meaning human. Humane conditions of work. So meaning to say, what about? About just and humane conditions of work. When we are talking about just and humane conditions of work, well, something that is acceptable, also acceptable to the employee, no? Of course, we have here, you cannot be treated unjustly, or you cannot just be treated just like an animal, no? It has to be humane, no? So when we speak of humane, even the conditions of work, even the pay, no? Even the privileges, and so on and so forth, no? So in short, it must be human, no? Human. The way you work, your treatment should be as a human being. So here, we have to recognize the dignity of every human person. Human person. So what is dignity? Of course, you should be afforded respect, courtesy, etc. No? So we go now to the fifth right of workers. The fifth right of workers that I will be discussing would be this, no? The right to a peaceful, right to peaceful, concerted, meaning collective, concerted activities, no? So here, peaceful, concerted activities. What activity would you like? Do you know that can be considered peaceful, concerted activity? Well, the right to strike. No, for instance, if you are not, if there is a deadlock between the demands of the workers and that of management, then they have this right to strike. So in short, they could assemble, no? They could meet, no? And whatever is the decision of the union or the labor organization, if that is to strike, they have also that right, no? But it has to be peacefully done, no? Concerted meaning collective, and you can only do this through the union. Okay, through the union. These peaceful, concerted activities shall be done through the labor organization. A labor organization or a union, I mean the same thing. Okay? Clear? The sixth right of workers, there are only 9 that I could mention for today, no? But there are other rights of workers. The ones that I'm mentioning are those that are major rights, no? Of workers, no? So I mentioned already they have the right to strike, no? And when does this happen, the right to strike? Especially if at the negotiation, the employer and employees cannot agree, no? There is what we call a deadlock, no? In their demands, no? Of course, the involved here would be the management and then the union or the workers, no? If they could not agree on the terms and conditions of employment, then we have a deadlock. So if they could not agree still after negotiation, then the right of the workers or employees to strike is already forthcoming, or it is right for them to strike already, no? So that's the sixth. We have the right to strike. And of course, if that is the decision of the union or the labor organization, so be it, no? The seventh right is what we call the right to a living wage. Meaning, the right to a living wage would be taking into consideration the living allowances, or what we call the prevailing cost of living, no? Meaning they could not just give you any amount or any sum that will be below the cost or the prevailing cost of living. So here, when we talk of the right to a living wage, we talk about the MWR, which is the minimum wage rate. And this one is of course set by the government. You could not go below this, no, the minimum wage rate. And the MWR, minimum wage rate, is dependent on the region. No, per region they have a minimum wage rate. Employers cannot go below the minimum wage rate. They have to follow this because this is also a law. The A, of course, workers' right is the right to participate. A, right to participate in policy and decision making processes. And how is this done? No? This is done through the MLCs. No? MLCs would stand for Management Labor Councils. No? The purpose of this, the Management Labor Councils, is to preserve what we call industrial peace. Industrial peace. No? So, before anything happens, no, of course, they have to refer the matter to the MLCs, and that is where employees and the management would come to terms with regard to policy and decision-making processes that affect the company as a whole. No? Remember the MLCs. No? Management Labor Councils. No? And the last, of course, right of workers is what we call the right to adjust share. To adjust share in the fruits of production. In the fruits of production. So here, sometimes a company will have its profit sharing scheme. No? Some companies have this. No? So it is not only the employer who is benefited in the form of ROI. What is ROI? Return of investments. No? This is for on the side of the employer. No? It should not only be the employer who should benefit from the operations of the business, but also the workers should have the right to adjust share in the fruits of production. Any company who knows that this is the right of workers or employees should have a profit sharing scheme to benefit not only the management but even the employees themselves. I think I have mentioned the different workers' rights and how many are there all in all. There are 9 major workers' rights. So I'd like you to memorize on that, and that is all for today. So see you next week. Okay.